If you don't mind, I'm going to be sitting down during this time. Katie Botke.
Thank you. I'm speaking on resolution 23-330, called the Authorizing Contract for Prison Rape Elimination Act. Reporting service for the Juvenile Justice Center. The act was signed into corporate statute. Statutes are not law. In 2003 by George W. Bush. First of all, and it covers, according to the act, ages 10 to 21, 10-year-old kids to 21-year-olds. First of all, what is an act? We have all these acts in politics, corporate, government. Merriam-Webster, it goes down to some definitions, but some of the definitions are one of successive parts or performances, as in a variety show or circus. B, the performer or performers in such an act. C, a performer or presentation identified with a particular group or individual. 6, a display of affected behavior, pretense. So moving on to the resolution. About the time that George Bush was signing that Prison Rape Elimination Act, in 2003, I used to go to Peck Farm, or Peck Field. My kids were playing soccer over there. We go to the dog park. I drive down that road. And if you keep going straight on the road and not turn in the parking lot to the park, you go into, I don't know what that is. It's a juvenile prison, I guess. It's barbed wire. It looks like a maximum security prison. And I was driving out one day and a car pulled up and asked me for directions to that juvenile center. There's a man driving, and it was a teenage boy in the passenger seat. And I just felt for that boy, because I didn't know what kind of hell he was going to go into. One thing for a kid that young to be incarcerated. And for another thing, we know it's pretty common knowledge what happens in some of these youth detention centers. There's a 1990s movie called The Sleepers. There's a lot of truth to the movies in Hollywood. They're called fiction. But a lot of them are based on what really happens. And The Sleepers, I'm not going to read the whole thing in the interest of time. But there's a summary. If you go on Wikipedia and read the summary, 4 boys get thrown into one of these homes or one of these places. And the inmates, it's prison guards. The prison guards who were attacking them with beatings, daily beatings, sexual abuse, to the point where they were all brutally raped. There's no consequence. One of the guards in the movie, this is fiction, in the movie, one of the guards becomes a politician. So in some cases, life imitates art or art imitates life. I've mentioned here before about the Franklin scandal. The Franklin scandal, you should all know, every American should know about that. It's about what happened to the boys in Boys Town, boys and girls. And who was behind that? When I was reading that book, the Franklin scandal, the Franklin conspiracy, when I was reading that book, I'm like, well, who was in the White House at that time? They're trafficking boys and girls from Boys Town and foster kids from the system, CPS system, from Omaha, Nebraska, to Washington, D.C. for late night sex parties, sex orgies at the White House. Who was in the White House at the time? This is in the 1980s. It was George H.W. Bush. So George H.W. Bush, I hope the truth comes out about him, about what he had done to boys, and what George Bush and Jeb Bush did to cover up his heinous crimes for years. And so then George Bush signs this act. It's ridiculous. It's an act. It's not real. Also, I just lead you to Magdalene Laundrie's This is church and state. They say that we're helping these kids. So government money, but they're just going into worse hell than they ever came out. And some of them didn't even commit crimes. Some of them are victims of crimes and they get put into these places. Philomena is another one. I'd mentioned Mark Campobello last month in my comment. He was at Mooseheart. So he was an accused child molester. He was at Mooseheart. Back then, or after that, after Campobello left, I did a press conference about the CEO at Mooseheart, who was a child molester.
Ms. Bakke, time is up.
Okay. In a better world, the boys would be able to, or the girls would be able to call the sheriff's department, get a direct line to the sheriff's department, who would then send the SWAT team to these centers, not to some family services center in Elgin, so they can take their report and let it continue. Thanks.
Thank you very much.